We're 3 weeks into the Premier League season and right about to go into the international break. I thought it would be a good idea to break it down. Who are some of the managers and some of the clubs that have been underperforming so far, to see if we can figure out which manager is going to be the first one to get the sack. So let's get straight into it. We're going to go from least likely to get sacked first to most likely to get sacked first. Starting off with Chelsea. Enzo Maresca, 1-1-1 in the Premier League season so far. A draw against Crystal Palace, a big win against Wolves, and then a loss to Manchester City in the season opener. I think Maresca has successfully trimmed down his roster size coming into the Premier League season. They've let go of 28 players who were either sold or sent out on loan, and they only brought in 13, which means hopefully finally the entire roster of Chelsea can fit into one locker room. So style of play has been interesting to watch, although I'm not sure he's got the players to do it. Sometimes he tries to build in a 3-2-5, leaving 5 forward players up the pitch and failing to actually get the ball that high up. I think we saw it in some of the preseason friendlies. I think we've seen it a little bit during some of these matches. And I think against really good teams, he's going to be exposed because Caicedo, Fernandes, some of the other midfield players he has have just been letting him down. The Mudryk situation is getting worse, and I think he's finally starting to give up on that one. I think he still has a lot of holes to fill in his roster, even though they've spent over $1 billion in the transfer market. I do think some of the new additions to the squad are going to be helpful, specifically for his style of play. Joao Felix, Pedro Neto, and Jadon Sancho. And I think those creative attacking players alongside Cole Palmer are going to be really good for Chelsea. And I think Cole Palmer alone might be the man that allows Enzo Maresca to keep his job. I do think Enzo Maresca gets a little bit more time to finally settle down and rebuild. However, he's got no more excuses for poor performances within the squad. Expectations for Chelsea are a top 4 finish. I think anything outside 6th place is a disappointment. Maresca needs to right the ship before Chelsea is no longer a big team. Next up, Big Ange. Came in hot, came in with a strong philosophy that I think won the fans over, although I think that high line is just not going to work against some of the big teams. Finished last season in Tottenham's usual position, which is 5th, right outside those Champions League spots. 1-1-1 to start the season. 2-1 loss to Newcastle, which is obviously a good team. 4-0 win over Everton, which we'll mention a little bit later in this video. And then a draw with Leicester City, the newly promoted team from the Championship. He did bring in Dominic Solanke, who I think has been a good addition, although he's injured and he's going to be out for quite a bit of time, which is probably going to put a little bit of strain on Big Ange's job security. Tottenham paid $64 million for Solanke from Bournemouth. They got Wilson Odobert for $29 million from Burnley, Archie Gray for $41 million from Leeds, and Lucas Bergvall for $10 million from Djurgården in Sweden. They only really sold Giovanni Lo Celso and Oliver Skip, and I think they're still trying to figure out what their best lineup is this season. So a lot of money being spent, not as much money coming in, which is a huge risk for a team like Tottenham as far as financial security. I think, as I said in the beginning, the high line is going to kill Big Ange. I think his inability to adjust to certain games and certain situations will not just cost him those games, but it's going to cost him the support with the fans. And although Tottenham is not typically a team that we would associate with high achievement or high standards, I think the board of Tottenham are going to let Big Ange go if they finish anywhere outside the European spots. I don't think he's fully changed the culture and the mindset at Tottenham, which is the biggest problem he needs to solve if he wants to keep his job. Going into the top 2, I think we're getting pretty close to being absolutely sure that these guys won't have a job by Christmas. In second spot, we have, of course, you guessed it, Erik Ten Hag. Ten Hag has been under extreme amounts of pressure from the press with the results that he's had so far, 1-2 to start the season. Chief Executive Omar Barada and Dan Ashworth, the sporting director, have both said that they fully back him. The problem with that is that this is what teams typically say after a poor run of results right before they change their mind and end the relationship just a few games or weeks later. I believe that anytime the board has to defend you, your job is not safe at all. So a slightly different attacking style than last year. I think a little bit more entertaining. However, the reason why I don't think he went with this style last season is because it's a little bit too risky. Pushing a lot of numbers forward has not really worked against Brighton or Liverpool. And then he goes on to say that he's not Harry Potter and talks about how Manuel Ugarte is not even close to being ready and in full fitness for Manchester United. Could take weeks or even months, he said. You pair that with the fact that one of their other new signings, Lenny Yoro, is out for a long period of time. I think Manchester United are going to be struggling with players coming in off the bench. And then you have players underperforming like Casemiro, Rashford, Zirkzee, Antony, Garnacho. The list goes on. I think at this point, he's finally been given enough chances. He's been given enough time. And even with half of his Ajax squad that he brought into Manchester United, the project, it looks like, is almost at its end. A few weeks ago, I made a video talking about how I don't think they should sack Ten Hag because of the entertaining style of football. However, it's looking like we're getting closer and closer to the tipping point. I think with the new owners at Ineos, Dan Ashworth, Omar Barada, the new additions that Manchester United has made to make sure that they find success on the pitch, anything outside of the top four is a failure for Erik Ten Hag. And I think he's going to be pretty far from that mark for at least the next couple of months. I do believe that Erik Ten Hag is the first big team manager to be sacked this season. Lastly, and the most certain for sure, unfortunately, the legend Sean Dyche at Everton finished 15th in the table last season after a 10 points deduction was cut down to 6. Even without the deduction, with the full deduction, he would have only moved up or down 1 or 2 spots. He's winless in the Premier League since the 11th of May against Sheffield United. And even in his summer friendlies, he only won 1 match against Preston North End, who's a team that's in the relegation battle in the Championship. The next opponents that he's got coming up are Aston Villa, Leicester, Crystal Palace, and Newcastle. And out of those 4 opponents, I think realistically, the maximum amount of points that Everton will get are 3 or 4. I think for Everton, the realistic expectations are to finish mid-table or a little bit lower, but staying clear and free of the relegation battles. I simply think that the old school methods are no longer working in this day and age. The way players are built, they won't respond very well if you're not a good tactical manager. I mean, this is the man that's got them training with shin guards on. And this is something that's not even done at the youth levels anymore. I think it's safe to say that Sean Dyche will not be the Everton manager going into Christmas, and probably way before that. So let me know if I missed anyone. Write down in the comments who you think is going to be the manager that gets sacked first, and is there going to be any surprises in the next few weeks after we get back from the international break? Let me know your thoughts.